The days in the mansion grew heavy with silence, but inside Chica's heart, silence was no refuge. Every polished marble floor, every gilded chandelier, every portrait of Daniel's father reminded him that he was living in another man's world. At first, when Daniel had introduced him as a brother, he had felt honored, even humbled. But the longer he stayed, the louder the whisper inside him grew. You are no guest. You are the rightful heir. Chica began to look at Daniel differently, not as a friend or savior, but as an obstacle, a boy who had been handed what he himself had been denied. His smiles grew thinner, his laughter less genuine. He watched Daniel play freely in the gardens, cheered by servants and adored by tutors, and though Daniel begged him to join, Chica felt a sting each time. If only they knew the truth, he thought. If only they knew I deserved more than this borrowed kindness. The greed inside him was no longer a flicker. It was a flame that warmed him at night but scorched everything he once held dear. Lady Amara was not blind to the change. She had seen how Chica's eyes lingered not just with admiration but with calculation, how his shoulders stiffened when Daniel was praised, how his tone grew sharp when the topic of his late father arose. Though she never admitted it aloud, she feared the boy's presence was a curse upon her household. The whispers in town did not help. Women at the market gossiped about the stray she had taken in. Men muttered about the son of a trader eating at her table. And one afternoon, as Chica fetched water near the well, he overheard them speaking about his father, how he had betrayed Daniel's father for silver, how his greed had led to the man's death. Their words struck like arrows, not to humble him, but to feed his anger. Chica clenched his jaw and swore silently. If my father died reaching for greatness, then I will live to seize it. He no longer cared for acceptance. He cared only for power. Daniel, innocent as ever, felt the rift growing though he could not name it. He noticed how Chica no longer ran to greet him in the mornings, how their laughter in the evenings had faded into silence. When Daniel tried to ask, Chica would wave him off with excuses about being tired or distracted. But at night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his young heart uneasy. He prayed silently that the bond he cherished would not unravel, that the brother he loved would not drift away. Yet even as he prayed, Chica stared out of his own window, eyes fixed on the moonlit mansion grounds, calculating, plotting, dreaming. Two boys under one roof, bound by fate but divided by greed. The seeds of division had been planted, and they were already taking root. The masked figures returned like shadows slipping between cracks in the night. They knew when to strike, when Lady Amara's grief was heavy, when Daniel was asleep, when Chica lingered alone by the courtyard. Their voices were low, tempting, as they laid before him a vision of greatness. Your father was no simple thief, one whispered. He was a man of vision. He sought power, not scraps. He died before he could claim it, but you can finish what he began. At first, Chica resisted, shaken by their words. But when they tossed him a folded paper sealed with wax, his trembling hands betrayed him. Inside was a fragment of a document, a deed, an old signature, a mark that hinted at inheritance. They told him his father had once held claims to the mansion's fortune, claims buried and silenced when he was accused of betrayal. Chica's heart thundered. If this was true, then everything he longed for was not greed but justice. He was not stealing, he was reclaiming. The mansion soon became his hunting ground for secrets. He began sneaking into the library, combing through dusty ledgers, tracing names and dates with feverish eyes. He studied the crest etched into the wax of the document, comparing it to seals in the old family records. Every clue seemed to whisper confirmation. You are more than a guest. You are an heir. And yet, each time Daniel entered the room, smiling and eager to share stories of school or games, Chica's heart wavered. For a fleeting moment, he would remember the laughter they shared, the nights they huddled under blankets whispering about dreams. But the whispers of the masked men were louder. Love will not feed you. Brotherhood will not crown you. Only power will. Slowly, love lost its grip, and greed tightened its chains. Lady Amara's unease grew unbearable. She watched Chica drifting further into secrecy, his gaze colder, his silence heavier. One evening she confronted him, her voice trembling between anger and sorrow. "What is it you seek, Chica? Why do your eyes burn as though the walls themselves owe you something?" Chica bit back his words, but deep inside, pride and greed twisted his reply. "Because maybe they do," he muttered under his breath. Amara froze, her suspicion confirmed. She withdrew into herself that night, torn between protecting her son and honoring the vow she had made to her late husband to show mercy. Daniel noticed her distress but was too young to understand. All he knew was that something precious was slipping through his fingers, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not hold his brother from falling into the abyss. The night of reckoning came with a moon so bright it seemed to spotlight the courtyard itself. Chica crept outside, clutching the fragment of the deed in his hand, waiting for the masked figures. They emerged from the shadows like smoke, their eyes gleaming behind their masks. They spoke of destiny, of power waiting to be claimed, of the weakness of Daniel and the pride of Amara. "You were never meant to serve," they hissed. "You were meant to rule. All you must do is open the way." Chica's hand shook, but not with fear, with longing. He could already see himself seated in the grand hall, the servants bowing, Amara silenced, Daniel beneath his shadow. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps broke through his fantasy. Daniel stood there, barefoot, his eyes wide with horror. "Chica, no," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, don't listen to them. You're my brother. That's all that matters." Chica's chest heaved, torn between love and greed, but the serpent of ambition had already sunk its fangs too deep. He turned to Daniel, his eyes blazing. "Brother," he spat, the word like venom. "I was never meant to be your brother. I was meant to be your master." The words cut through Daniel's soul like fire. He staggered back, tears filling his eyes, unable to recognize the boy who once held his hand in the streets, who once shielded him from loneliness. Above them, Lady Amara stood at her balcony, her hand over her mouth as the truth shattered her heart. She had feared this day, and now it had come. Her voice broke the silence as she screamed for the guards. But by the time they rushed into the courtyard, the masked figures had vanished into the shadows, and Chica was gone with them. The gates of the mansion slammed shut that night with a sound that echoed like a curse. Inside, Daniel fell to his knees, sobbing, whispering into the cold night air, "Come back, brother. Please, come back." Lady Amara placed a trembling hand on his shoulder, but her eyes were filled with grief and fear. She knew Chica's greed had consumed him, that he had chosen ambition over family, power over love. And yet, in the distance, Chica walked into the shadows with silver in his pocket and fire in his heart. He did not look back. He did not hear Daniel's cries. The boy who had once been abandoned by his father had now abandoned the only family who had truly loved him. The story closed not with triumph, but with tragedy, a reminder that greed, once embraced, consumes everything, leaving nothing but ashes where love once lived. The mansion stood tall, its walls unbroken, its lights still glowing into the night. Yet inside, hearts had been shattered, and the bond that once gave warmth to its halls had been torn apart. Daniel lingered at the gates long after the guards returned to their posts, his small frame shaking with grief. Lady Amara, though she held her son tightly, could not erase the image of Chica's burning eyes, or the venom in his voice as he renounced brotherhood for mastery. The boy she had reluctantly welcomed, the boy Daniel had fiercely loved, had chosen the path of shadows. Chica walked into the darkness with the masked figures, clutching the silver as though it were life itself, his mind consumed by visions of crowns and thrones. Yet what he did not see, what greed had blinded him to, was that the love he had thrown away was worth more than all the gold and deeds the world could offer. The mansion he dreamed of ruling no longer welcomed him. The family he longed for had been his, but he let it slip through his fingers. And though his steps echoed with pride that night, they were the steps of a boy already lost to himself. So the story ends, not with triumph, but with sorrow, a reminder etched into every corner of that grand house, whispered in Daniel's nightly prayers, and carried in Lady Amara's weary heart. Greed is a fire that promises warmth, but it consumes until nothing remains but ashes. Chica's tale is a warning, that love ignored becomes a wound, and ambition without humility is a path that leads only into darkness. The mansion still stands, but the brotherhood is gone. And in the silence of the night, Daniel's voice carries the last word. "Come back, brother, come back."